So I'm going to quickly, in about 10 minutes, give you the view on this topic of Alzheimer's disease and brain health from the point of view of a layman or a philanthropist. And then Rudy is going to present the point of view of a scientist. And I promise you, he will be both understandable and optimistic in his talk. If you have any questions during this, please submit them under the chat button. And if we have time, we'll try and address them. If we don't have time, I'm happy to address them over email later. So this slide to me really says it all as to why this topic is important. Alzheimer's affects millions of people. It's always fatal as a disease. It has seen a huge increase as our population ages, a huge increase in the deaths, and it's the only of the 5 leading causes of death that has seen that increase. It's amazingly expensive to do caregiving and research on this disease, and between 3 and 4 out of 10 of people 85 and over will suffer from dementia. This slide doesn't add much. It repeats many of those points, but it does point out that there's 15 million unpaid caregivers, mostly spouses or family members. And our children's generation is becoming a sandwich generation. They're facing the financial and emotional challenges of raising children on the one hand, and increasingly likely to face the financial and emotional responsibility to care for their parents, our generation, with dementia. So this topic is extremely personal to me. My wife was diagnosed with the disease in 2000 at the age of 58. We went to all the wonderful teaching hospitals in Boston, and we got the same discouraging message. There are 3, why don't you try 3 Advil a day, the doctor said. That might help. And yes, there's some FDA-approved drugs for Alzheimer's disease like Reminol and Aricept. Frankly, they won't help. Now, as Bruce mentioned, after graduating in '66, I served 2 years in the Pentagon, and then I had the amazing good fortune of joining Greylock Partners, one of the first venture capital partnerships in the country. And I've seen firsthand the power of combining world-class entrepreneurs with proper venture financing and follow-on financing. That combination has created companies, as you all know, that have changed your lives and mine. Think of Apple, think of Google, think of Facebook, think of Uber. Think of the entire biotechnology industry, which has basically been started by venture financing. So the idea that 3 Advil a day was the best we could do was unacceptable to me. This is not a new disease. It's been discovered over 100 years ago. Nor is it an orphan disease affecting a few thousand. As I pointed out, it affects millions. So in 2004, 2 other families and I co-founded Cure Alzheimer's Fund. And we used a venture capital model to try and accelerate the probability of discovering therapies that would either prevent, slow, or even possibly reverse this disease. Now, you might ask, how does a venture capital model fit into a nonprofit? Well, the really great venture capitalists are not reactive. They don't react to unsolicited proposals and requests for funding. They're proactive in trying to go out and identify world-class entrepreneurs to back. They're long-term in their investment horizon, and they try and invest in high-risk, high-reward projects that, if successful, have the chance of being transformational. Venture capitalists by nature hate bureaucracy, and because starting a business is so difficult, venture firms often require their portfolio companies to cooperate and communicate and share best practices with one another. Finally, at least at Greylock, we worked hard to try and align the interests of our limited partner investors, our general partners, and the entrepreneurs. So applying that model to Cure Alzheimer's Fund, we went out and identified our speaker today, Rudy Tanzi, who is one of the leading geneticists on Alzheimer's disease. And then we asked Rudy to recruit a dream team, a team of 15 or 16 other leading academic researchers on this disease. We told these researchers, you don't have to compete for our funding, we've chosen you. But what we want you to do is submit to us high risk, high reward projects that you can't get funded from more traditional but risk adverse sources like the NIH. And we hate bureaucracy, so just give us a 2 or 3 page description of the project and we'll fund you in a matter of months, not the 2 years it usually takes for a successful NIH grant. But there is a catch. You have to get out of your academic silos. You have to share your unpublished data with one another. You have to push each other to make each other's projects better. You really have to function as, quote, a dream team. And as to the alignment of interests, the founders and the board of Cure Alzheimer's agreed to pay all the overhead costs so that any donor generous enough to give us $1 would know that 100 cents of that dollar will go to the research. So, as Bruce said, after 15 years, we funded 530 grants around the world and over $125 million of research. And we're very proud of the fact that we're the only Alzheimer's disease charity that receives the highest ratings from Charity Navigator and GuideStar. I like to say that our researchers have boxed above their weight. They have published nearly 750 papers in top peer-reviewed science magazines, and those papers have been cited 47,000 times, which just shows the amazing reach that this group of researchers has. And by the way, the group has expanded over the years to include approximately 80 world-class researchers. We've had a high return on investment for our funding, as evidenced by very large follow-on funding from the NIH and other sources on the projects that we have de-risked. And as Rudy will talk about in his talk, these scientists have discovered new tools for the research community, new approaches, new genetic risk factors. They've fundamentally increased the perspective on this disease. But this important work has as its goal new therapies for those people who have showed signs of dementia. They're already on the path to Alzheimer's disease. 4 years ago, Rudy and 2 other leading researcher clinicians at Mass General Hospital came to me with a new philanthropic opportunity to create a virtual center for brain health at Mass General. Studies have shown that you are more likely to suffer from poor brain health than from diabetes, heart disease, or cancer. Yet our healthcare system does not include routine monitoring of brain health across one's lifespan. When you and I go for an annual physical, we have our blood taken, we have probably some images, CAT scans or MRIs. We're told what our blood pressure is, what our cholesterol level is, what our sugar level is, what our PSA score is. And we're given some prescriptions and courses of action to follow between our annual physicals for every organ in the body except the brain. So this center hopes to change that. We hope to harness the latest scientific discoveries to make routine brain care across the lifespan of an individual a routine. So our focus first, and we've achieved this, is to identify and characterize an indicator of brain health to facilitate brain health assessments. We have come up, or the researchers at MGH at the center have come up with a brain care score. It's easy to administer for both the physician and the patient, and our initial pilot tests have shown that it's extremely valid and accurate. We're now going to roll this out to additional primary care systems to make sure that we can understand how it can best be used. Secondly, we're going to do research to develop interventions that will prevent brain disease and improve brain function. These interventions have the possibility of letting you not only maintain your brain's care score from one visit to the next, but improve it over time. Now, many of these will be lifestyle changes, but they will also include natural supplements and future therapies and drugs. And finally, we hope to use the power of Mass General Hospital. It's the largest medical research institution in the country, to share these findings and to try and integrate the brain care score and the proven interventions into regular practice in primary care. It's a nice reunion, so I won't make you read a case, but Bill Salmon wrote a wonderful case on this new Center for Brain Health and its potential, and he taught it this last fall in his class called Entrepreneurial Solutions for World Problems. If any of you would like a copy of the case, please send me an email and I'll be glad to forward it to you. Now, with no further ado, let me introduce Rudy Tanzi. I've known Rudy and worked with him for the last 15 years. I can guarantee you he is one of the world's experts on both brain health and Alzheimer's disease. So, Rudy, welcome to the class of 66.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thanks for your kind introduction, and thanks for the invitation to have me here today. It's so great to see so many of you, and to give you an update on why I'm optimistic about Alzheimer's disease and about the future of our brain health. And I want to start by saying that right now, if you look at our lifespan, the biggest gap between lifespan and health span is brain health span. We want to bridge that gap. We want to, our goal, whether it's Cure Alzheimer's Fund, whether it's the research we're doing in my lab, or whether it's the McCance Center for Brain Health, is to learn how to beat this disease before it actually starts to destroy the brain. The first thing I want to say, and Henry mentioned this, is that when you go for your physical every year, you go for a physical. Most don't get a mental. And if the doc does look from the neck up, there's no checkup from the neck up. They will look in the holes in your head. They'll look in your nose, your eyes, your ears, your mouth. They don't think about the brain, because we don't have a good way to assess the brain every year. And that's one of the things we're working on. The future will be early detection of brain health starting to slide, early detection of disease pathology, and nipping this disease in the bud before it hits. I know that you can't, I can see some of you on my screen right now before I share my slides, but for those who I can see, which is about 50 of you, I'd like to ask how many of you know someone with Alzheimer's disease or someone caring for an Alzheimer's patient? Raise your hand. So on my screen, it's about, looks like about 80% of the folks raise their hands, and I'm thinking that's probably the same on the other screens. This is a disease that's becoming more and more rampant because, and let me just share my slides at this point. We're living long enough for this disease to catch up with us. This is an age-related disease. And so let me just start sharing for a minute and make sure I got this going. I hope you all can see that. So today I'm going to talk about how we're going to stop Alzheimer's, how we're going to preserve brain health. And a lot of this is going to have, a lot of my focus will be on early detection and early intervention of this disease. So I got some, here we go, some things to show. As a professor at Harvard, I do have to show my financial disclosures. These are companies which I've either co-founded or have a financial interest in or consult for. And so, I'm sorry, my slides are misbehaving on my screens. I hope you can still see that. So I just wanted to show my disclosures first as per regulations. Now, you heard already a lot about Alzheimer's from Henry, who really has been an incredible partner. Cure Alzheimer's Fund, Henry McCance, and the other families. I can tell you, and I don't want to make this an advertisement for Cure Alzheimer's Fund, but I have to tell you that if you look at the greatest paradigm shifts in this field over the last 15 years, this little foundation, Cure Alzheimer's Fund, has inspired most of them. Much of what we find, because we're taking the A-League, the top innovators and Alzheimer researchers in the world, much of what we do come up with ends up being 5 or 10 years ahead of its time. And when we first come up with it, it's not even on the map. And then 5, 10 years later, it's the most studied thing in Alzheimer's disease, like the role of inflammation in the brain, for example. And this is the power of Cure Alzheimer's Fund. So I'm going to mention along the way where Cure Alzheimer's Fund has made a difference in really changing how we think about Alzheimer's and why we're so optimistic about the future. Now, this is the most common form of dementia in the elderly. Henry told you about the cost. I want to emphasize this point, that if you ask how many people in this country have the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, which I'll show you in a moment, in their brains, but don't yet have symptoms, kind of like having high cholesterol or plaques forming in your arteries, but don't yet have heart disease. How many are on their way or at higher risk? It's 38 million people. And most of them, the majority are women. 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. So gender plays a big role here. And given that the fastest growing segment of our population is 85 years old, current lifespan is an average of 80 years, this is a major pandemic. This is, we're dealing with COVID right now, but as Barron's put it, this is the other pandemic that's not going to go away so fast with a vaccine. There's a lot more work to do, and that's what I'm going to tell you about in the next half hour. So this is the continuum of Alzheimer's. And I just want to first say that I think we all agree in the medical world that Alzheimer's disease is the single greatest threat to brain health span as we age. And this just shows the continuum of Alzheimer's from that preclinical stage, which can be 30 years. Okay, these are not to scale. These are just showing you the stages. But the preclinical stage where you have pathology without the disease can be 30 years in the making. And along the way, as you're entering toward that moment where there's mild cognitive impairment, those first symptoms that appear, you have to ask yourself, is this Alzheimer's or is it senior moments? And, we joke about senior moments, but, I just want to put them in perspective. And for many, the reason why we have senior moments is that with age, we can tend to become just too busy or jaded or just pay less attention to what's going on, less mindful. So for this little child here, every moment is amazing. Every moment's a wow moment, right? Everything's fresh and new. For this guy, it's like, been there, done that. So what moments? And so you have to ask yourself when you're having trouble remembering what happened a half hour ago, an hour ago, what you had for lunch, remembering a name or a word. Is it, or where you put your keys, is it the beginning of Alzheimer's, or is it just that you're not paying enough attention? And the difference with Alzheimer's is when memory lapses start to really challenge daily living. And you notice that it's just tough to carry on your daily routines because of your memory. That's when you have to wonder whether it's Alzheimer's versus just, are you paying attention? And here's why. This is the hippocampus in the brain. And hippocampus in Greek means seahorse, because whoever first found the hippocampus, rightly so, said it looks like a seahorse, if you look at the comparison the two here. This is where you process your world. It's also where Alzheimer's first hits. It's the battleground. And here's how cognition works, right? So sensory signals are hitting your eyes and ears. You're getting photons hitting your eyes. You're getting sound waves hitting your ears. And when you're an infant, these sensory signals don't make any sense. Over a whole lifetime, as the senses bring in information and all of it lands in the hippocampus, it's there that when you see a pair of red shoes, you say, oh, red shoes, maybe there's a woman who's going to wear those going out tonight. As a baby sees red shoes, it's like, oh, it has a certain shape, it's a color, but there's no meaning to it. It's in the hippocampus that we give meaning to sensory signals and turn them into information. Okay. Now, if you're not paying attention, you're not being mindful, it's possible that you're not turning those signals into meaningful information. They're going right through and you're just not giving them context. So of course, you're not going to remember them later on. But if it's Alzheimer's pathology, the difference is you cannot. The signals are coming in, and over time, you can't turn them into meaningful information. An Alzheimer's patient might go to the fridge, smell food that's spoiled, but that doesn't, when the olfactory experience of that rotten food hits the nose, that's not turned into information in the brain that says, oh, I shouldn't eat this. That meaningful context is not happening because of the pathology in the hippocampus. That's essentially what this disease is. And so this loss of this cognitive processing dissolves the connection with the world, dissolves connection with oneself. That whole tapestry of 100 billion neurons, hundreds of trillions of connections that you have made your entire life with all your experiences gets torn apart like a tapestry, thread by thread, by this insidious, devastating disease. And that's what we need to stop. This is the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge as we age, and certainly the biggest challenge to brain health span. So how do we do it? Well, first we have to know what's happening in the brain. And luckily we've known this for a while. And here are the main pathological features. Outside of the nerve cells, you get these big sticky clumps of what's called beta amyloid. It's made up of something we call for short A beta or beta amyloid. These are these clumps outside of nerve cells. They're plaques. And that amyloid, we now know, causes tangles or neurofibrillary tangles to form in the nerve cells. So as this amyloid's accumulating outside the nerve cell, inside the nerve cell, you make a tangle made of a protein called tau tangles. And they're like these twisted filaments that choke the nerve cell from inside and kill it. And as nerve cells die, very slowly over time, it can take decades, over time, neuroinflammation occurs. So think about COVID, right? You've all read the COVID virus doesn't kill you. The COVID virus causes a cytokine storm. Cytokines are the mediators, the chemical mediators of inflammation. That cytokine storm that causes inflammation in the vessels and lungs is what will kill a patient or make them very ill. Alzheimer's disease, the plaques and the tangles start killing X number of nerve cells. That triggers a cytokine storm in the brain of neuroinflammation, which, as I'll tell you, causes the bulk of the killing. So the bad news is that we all get these plaques and tangles after the age of 40, almost without fail. It's part of aging. You get these plaques and tangles. The good news is we've learned from what are called resilient brains that you can have lots. This is very rare, but it's a teaching moment. Sometimes someone would die in their 80s. They had no cognitive problems, fully on the ball. And then they have an autopsy. The pathologist says, whoa, look at all these plaques and tangles. This is an Alzheimer's patient. Go back and check the records. No, this person was perfectly fine cognitively. And in these cases of where there's a mismatch, so many plaques and tangles, but no dementia. This is the initiating pathology. How did they not have dementia? The answer is always the same. They had no neuroinflammation, no cytokine storm. Their brain's primitive innate immune system stayed chilled out. Plaques were there, the tangles were there, the neurons were dying, but the cells in the brain that protect the brain, the glial cells, did not overreact. And thus, without neuroinflammation, because these what are called microglia, astrocytes stayed calm, they didn't get dementia. And so this is a very big clue for us because that says, the good news is we can have lots of plaques and tangles. If we stop that cytokine storm, that inflammatory response to the plaques, tangles, and initial cell death, we can stop this disease. And it's also our best hope for treating this disease. These are the three pathologies. So I like to put it this way. The beta amyloid plaques are like a match. They like these brush fires we call tangles. I call them brush fires because they spread. After the tangles form, they spread through the brain for decades. And some of these brush fires tip off forest fires, neuroinflammation, okay? And it's this process of neuroinflammation triggered by the plaques and tangles that kills 10 to 100 times more nerve cells than the plaques and tangles did to start this process. Okay, so this is very new data. This is a very new understanding based on lots of postmortem brain analysis, imaging, et cetera. And this process takes decades. Now, this says beta amyloid's the match. Guess what else is a match? Bangs to the head. If you play, I work with the Patriots. I'm a brain health advisor to Bill Belichick and the Patriots now for many years. And I have to tell them, look, concussions, bangs to the head every day also cause these tangles. No need for amyloid. The match can be head bangs cause tangles. And think about the player who had too many head bangs in their 20s. If they're going to get a form of dementia called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which happens in some players, and that's probably not going to happen until they're about 50. So it takes 2 or 3 or more decades for these brush fires to spread and cause forest fires in an unfortunate NFL player or boxer before they get the same dementia. Alzheimer's, the most common form of dementia, the killing tangles are induced by the amyloid, and that also takes decades to happen. And this is shown here. If you look at brain imaging, if you look here on the left, see this red line? This is the buildup of plaque in the brain over 15 to 20 years before any symptoms. This dashed line is when symptoms occur, mild cognitive impairment, okay? Look what happens. This red line is the amyloid coming up. By the time you hit dementia, the plaques in the brain have peaked. The brain's already full of plaque by the time you start the earliest signs of dementia. Look on this side over here, the orange line. The amyloid's coming up. Tangles are following behind it because the amyloid has to cause the tangles. By the time dementia hits, which is right here, this dashed line, the amyloid's already peaked and going back down. This is why it's been so challenging for clinical trials that are focusing on amyloid to work. Because if you want to stop the amyloid, you have to hit way back here. You have to know 10, 15, 20, even 25 years before symptoms, amyloid's building up, just like cholesterol with heart disease. And then you stop it. You have to hit the amyloid very, very early. You have to hit the tangles early. You have to hit the neuroinflammation early. The key will be early detection, early intervention. Right now, the elephant in the room is this. We don't diagnose Alzheimer's disease until the brain has degenerated to the point of dysfunction, full of plaques, full of tangles, already raging forest fires of neuroinflammation, symptoms, and then we try to blow out the match. We try to get rid of the amyloid while there's a raging forest fire. That's the problem, because we didn't know the timing until just very recently, thanks to the amazing advances with brain imaging, we did not know this process took so long over time. Imagine if we did the same thing with cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Imagine if we said, we're going to wait till you lose half the beta cells in your pancreas, and then we'll diagnose diabetes and try to take care of it. Or imagine if we said, you know, we're going to let your cholesterol just ride really high and your blood pressure just be off the rails. And then we're going to treat you after you have heart disease by trying to bring that cholesterol back down. Imagine if you have a congestive heart failure patient, just had a heart attack, and the doc says, don't worry, all you have to take is statin, just bring your cholesterol down. No, you had to do that decades before. We have to bring Alzheimer's up to this same stage of treatment, early detection, early intervention. And that's why, as Henry just told you, we started the McCance Center for Brain Health, where we want to figure out those earliest indicators of brain health, earliest indicators of disease starting pre-symptomatically, and nip it in the bud, have interventions to keep the brain healthy before it gets sick, just like we do for the pancreas and diabetes and the heart and heart disease. So this is our mantra. This has always been the mantra of Cure Alzheimer's Fund. Early prediction, look at your family history. We're advancing all the time in gene testing for Alzheimer's. And when the time comes, and for most people by 50 years old in the future, but if your family history dictates maybe earlier, early detection, imaging, biomarkers, digital technologies. And most importantly, if you're in trouble, early intervention before the brain degenerates to the point of dysfunction. This is a very complicated slide, but it's just to show you how many genes we found. I was very lucky in my life. Back when I was a student at Harvard, I discovered the first Alzheimer's gene. It's called the amyloid precursor protein. It gives rise to the amyloid plaques. And also we discovered the presenilin genes. These were the early onset Alzheimer's genes that guarantee the disease by 60 years old. These mutations which only account for 1 to 2% of Alzheimer's, guarantee the disease. Lifestyle doesn't matter. But in 97 to 98% of cases, the other genes involved, like ApoE, which is the biggest risk factor, and all these growing number of genes, 90 and counting now, many of these found through the Cure Alzheimer's Fund, Alzheimer's Genome Project, that I'm fortunate to direct over the last 15 years. All of these genes are addressable by lifestyle. They don't guarantee the disease. Even ApoE4, which many of you may have heard of, one copy of E4 from one parent increases risk 4-fold, 2 copies 14-fold, but does not guarantee the disease like these early onset genes. And all 4 of these first Alzheimer's genes all told us amyloid starts this disease. That's why the industry is focused on amyloid. Then we had to learn, whoa, the amyloid's occurring 2-3 decades before symptoms. You're hitting it at the time of symptoms, the amyloid's peaked out. It's done its job. We're hoping that we can still help patients by hitting amyloid if you hit them early enough. And I'll address that a little bit more on the Biogen trial in a few slides. So for early detection, let's do this first. And by the way, at the McCance Center, we're using all this information to come up with what's called a polygenic risk score. So we're working very hard so that based on your genome, whole genome sequencing, we'll be able to look agnostically at your entire genome and say, for all these genes, what's your overall polygenic risk score? And what is your predicted age when you need to early detection? Because early detection isn't going to be one size fits all. For some, it needs to be earlier. For everyone, it needs to at least be by 50 in the future. And early detection is going to be brain imaging, blood tests, which are rapidly coming. We just found 2 new blood-based biomarkers at the McCance Center that actually predict cognitive trajectory in normal elderly. It predicts, and even if you have amyloid in your brain already, it predicts how fast you're going to go downhill based on blood biomarkers. We want to get these into the clinic right away. They're giving us clues also about how to stop the disease should you be told you have amyloid in your brain, but you don't have symptoms yet. So these are the blood-based biomarkers. And also I'm working on, this is a disclosure, I started a company called React Neuro, where we're using a device that's virtual reality together with eye scanning and voice analysis to assess your brain health, a brain health index. We don't have a blood pressure cuff or a stethoscope for the brain. That's what we're hoping this device will come. And in fact, it was inspired when I was talking to Bill Belichick with the Patriots work that I do. And he said, boy, I don't know when to put a player back on the field who has a concussion. And it seems like such a risky thing when you just have a neurologist saying, follow my finger, and they follow their eyes and say, okay, you can go back in or not. He said, there must be a better way. And inspired by that, starting 5 years ago, we came up with this device that does high resolution eye scanning, because when the brain pathology begins, even if a neurologist can't see the abnormal movement of the eyes, if you have a device that can scan the eyes at nanosecond level, you can start to detect that there's something wrong with the brain, even without the big acute effects of a concussion. So that's what inspired us. And we're also doing voice analysis with it, neuropsych exams. And now, after 5 years, we're baselining all the Patriots players with this device so that during the season, when they get hit in the head, you can see how they're doing now after the headbang versus what they were baselined with this device before. We're also using it in senior living. Senior living directors are using it to assess brain health of their residents so that they can track week to week how they're doing in case somebody might need some extra care and supervision. So that's early detection. But most importantly, if you're going to do early detection, you need early intervention. And these are the categories: hitting amyloid, hitting the tangles, and protecting the neurons. Okay, and I'll go through these. On June 7th, next Monday, we will hear about Biogen's aducanumab decision. This is an antibody to amyloid that activates the clearance of the amyloid from the brain. I'm proud to say it was inspired originally by my late colleague, Rob Moyer, who passed away with a glioblastoma a year and a half ago. Rob and I published a paper showing that there are naturally occurring antibodies, autoantibodies to amyloid, and the higher levels you have, the more protected you are. And then Roger Nietzsche at Neuroimmune in Switzerland took our paper and said, I'm going to go after those antibodies. And he found them, the protective ones, and then he translated that into what's called aducanumab and licensed that to Biogen. And what aducanumab does is it clears amyloid. And one of their trials was positive for improving cognition. The other phase 3 trial was negative. And now the FDA has to weigh that evidence and say, even though what we know from brain imaging, you have to clear amyloid early on, it might be too late at the time of symptoms. With aducanumab, what Biogen is betting is if you hit patients at the earliest point of conversion to Alzheimer's, can you improve their cognition by hitting that amyloid, even when it's near its peak amount? And like I said, one trial says yes, one trial says no. The FDA is weighing the evidence. We'll know next Monday. It'll be a big, big day for Alzheimer's disease. There are other ways to clear amyloid. We found that the asthma drug cromolyn can clear amyloid, similar to aducanumab. We had to make a special form of it that gets into the brain. My slides are going wacky by themselves, sorry. With Cure Alzheimer's Fund, we developed what are called gamma secretase modulators. They completely reverse the effects of those early onset familial mutations that guarantee the disease. So I think about how many discussions I had, where you have, for example, a 30-year-old woman, mom, who comes in and we know she has one of those early onset familial mutations that guarantees the disease by 50. And you have to tell her, it's guaranteed you're going to have Alzheimer's by 45. And she thinks about her children and she says, boy, that means that by the time my kids are graduating college, I'm not going to know who they are. And it's heartbreaking, you can imagine. Well, the gamma secretase modulators that Cure Alzheimer's Fund seeded the funding for, and the NIH picked up the bulk of the price, 20 years of development, and now we're going into clinical trials. These drugs, if they're safe, will not only treat all of Alzheimer's and help prevent it early on, the way you take a statin for cholesterol and heart disease, this would be for your amyloid, but for those unfortunate people with a death sentence of guaranteed early onset Alzheimer's, it will reverse those effects. And we can finally give that 30-year-old woman some hope. And it was Cure Alzheimer's Fund who believed in us and gave us the seed money to get us going. Then the NIH added in over time $15 million. And now we're planning our first clinical trial coming up for this year. So great hope for that. But again, this is something you'd want to use as early as possible, just like aducanumab. You can also stop the tangles from spreading. I told you those brush fires, the tangles, and there are folks making antibodies to the tau protein with the tangle spreading. And those are in trials. And you can also try to protect the neurons from the cell death brought on by the plaques and tangles, and especially by the neuroinflammation. I'm going to tell you at the end about a great victory we've had with a small company I helped start, Cure Alzheimer's Fund, supported them, called Amylyx. We also, because of Cure Alzheimer's Fund, discovered the first gene that controls neuroinflammation, the on switch. We found the gene that turns on the cytokine storm in the brain. Thanks to the Cure Alzheimer's Fund, Alzheimer's Genome Project is called CD33. And now companies like AbbVie and Elector are using immunotherapy against that gene and trying to prevent the triggering of the cytokine storm, the triggering of the neuroinflammation. So lots of great stuff happening already in clinical trials. And how do we get more drugs? And this is, again, another great victory from Cure Alzheimer's Fund, where they believed in us, where we realized that mouse models of Alzheimer's, transgenic mice, are terrible models for Alzheimer's. They don't recapitulate the disease. So Cure Alzheimer's Fund funded us to recreate Alzheimer's disease in a dish, Alzheimer's in a dish. We can recreate plaques to tangles to neuroinflammation in a petri dish, or even in a small paper punch-sized well in a tray in just 5 weeks. Think about that. 8 decades of brewing pathology in 5 weeks in a dish. This has made Alzheimer's drug discovery 100 times faster, 100 times cheaper, and much more relevant in trying to use mice, all because of this new system of brain-type organoids, mini human brain organoids in a dish, recapitulating the disease. And one of the first drugs that came out of that was Amylyx, AMX0035. This, like, if you really want to help patients now, if they're in full-blown Alzheimer's, it's a little late to stop the plaques and tangles that began this disease. Okay, you have to get that early. But if you want to help a patient right now, you have to protect their neurons from dying in the midst of that forest fire. And if you stop the neurons from dying, you'll have less fuel to feed that forest fire. So working with two young kids from Brown University, Justin Klee and Josh Cohen, and you always listen to kids. I always remember the brain is at peak performance in your 20s. Okay. So these two kids came and they found me because when I was in college, I was in the Sigma Chi fraternity, and they were Sigma Chi members at Brown. And that year, 2013, Sigma Chi put me in their Hall of Fame, and they read about my research, and they were doing a senior thesis. And they said, so Tanzi thinks it's neuroinflammation, you got to protect the neurons from it. And they Googled all night and came up with ideas. And they came to see me with a very naive idea about how to protect 2 points of vulnerability in the neuron from dying in the face of neuroinflammation. So it was a combination of two drugs, and we worked it through. And I tried to teach these two young whippersnappers how hard it is to develop a drug. And I designed experiments for them that were guaranteed to fail. You pour hydrogen peroxide on nerve cells, they all die, which is like neuroinflammation times 1,000,000. I said, let's see how these two drugs do. Unbelievably, they saved 90% of the nerve cells. I said, it's impossible. Let's do it again. They saved 95%. I'm like, well, geez, this is a great idea. And we're on to something here. So went to Henry and Cure Alzheimer's Fund and said, I never saw anything like this. Let's support this. Cure Alzheimer's Fund got them going. And the first thing we did was an ALS trial, because whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or ALS, it's the same pathway. Something gets nerve cell death going, like plaques and tangles, or in Parkinson's, it's Lewy bodies, or in ALS, it's called TDP43 inclusions. So you get the initial killing, but you have to trigger the neuroinflammation to get the big killing to get the symptoms. So if you have a drug that protects against neuroinflammation, you can try it across the board, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. So we went after ALS first. And we did a trial, and the trial worked. And we published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine last year. We were able to slow down the symptoms of ALS. This paper is shown here. Got a lot of coverage, New York Times, elsewhere. And now this new ALS combination drug looks like it's going to first be approved in Canada. Europe has indicated they'll have conditional approval. We approve it, but we have to do another trial. And the FDA, they're a little slower. They want to see the next trial, and we'll follow the trial, maybe even with interim results, we might do approval. But at least this thing gets off the ground. And two same drugs, because they protect neurons against inflammation, are now in a phase 2 Alzheimer's trial that finished. The trial locked up. I literally check my phone every 5 minutes for a text from the two kids from Brown, who are now like 28 years old each, with their company Amyloid, to see what the results are. When the ALS trial results came in, they texted me at 1:30 in the morning. I was waiting for the text, and they said, grab a drink, we're celebrating. And they forced me to have a 12-year-old Macallan, I think it was a 15-year-old Macallan, at about 1:30 in the morning, toasting this first victory in a neurodegenerative disease in over a decade with this idea. So again, this is how out-of-the-box thinking, coming up with new models of disease using genes and using brains in a dish, the stuff that Cure Alzheimer's Fund's funded, has already paid off. And we've done more. We've taken all the approved drugs available. We have taken every natural product and supplement we can find. And because it's so fast, we could test these in a dish like that, right? See, this is an index card size tray with 96 punch size wells. And each one, we have a mini brain recapitulating Alzheimer's disease in 5 weeks. We can ask which approved drugs ready to go, which supplements and natural products you can buy on Amazon are already going to work. And we found 4 that stop plaques. We found 31 prevent the plaques from making the tangles. We found 42 that either prevent the neuroinflammation or to protect the neurons. And the next phase is the Cure Alzheimer's Fund, and this is what we call Act Fast, getting the best of these drugs and supplements into clinical trials, starting a clinical trial program with safe drugs that are already out there, repurposing them, natural products, supplements that you wouldn't have thought of before for brain health, but the DISH model says, yes, they stop plaques or tangles or neuroinflammation, and getting these into trials. That's the next phase that we're now ramping up for and doing a lot of fundraising for as well. And I'm very excited about. Meanwhile, for a lot of these natural products and supplements, for the best ones, I've already recommended them to family and friends. I don't put them on my slide presentation just because there's too much snake oil out there. You know, you see on TV, jellyfish and everything else. They're supposed to help your brain. It's always tough to recommend supplements or natural products where there haven't been clinical trials yet. But for those who ask me, with the caveat where I say, look, it's only based on a lab-based model, they're deemed to be safe. We haven't done the clinical trials yet. We're still planning them. I'm happy to share them. I share them with the New England Patriots because God knows the players need that help. So if you're interested, you're welcome to reach out to me about what that list is. So that's how we're going to end Alzheimer's, preventing Alzheimer's and treating Alzheimer's patients. If you're going to treat patients, you have to protect the neurons. If you want to prevent it, you have to stop those plaques and tangles early. But I want to just end the last 5 minutes about what can we do now? What can we do now? And here's why I use this acronym, SHIELD. We use this acronym SHIELD at the McCance Center as well. Key ingredients: sleep, handling stress, interaction with others, exercise, learn new things, and diet. Let's start with sleep. You need 7 to 8 hours per day. And even if it's not continuous, naps count. Because if you have a nap and you dream a little bit, and you have that cycle of dreaming and then deep sleep, that's one cycle of rinsing the brain of debris, like amyloid, it's neurotoxic. Sleep is like what I call mental floss. It cleans the brain out. It's also when you consolidate memory. So with a naps at nighttime, try to get to 8 hours per day. Handle stress. Stress is a killer, okay? Stress causes cortisol in the brain, which kills neurons and triggers cytokines and neuroinflammation. It's a major risk factor in Alzheimer's. So handling stress. H also stands for hypertension. Controlling blood pressure is a great way to help reduce your risk for brain disease. So keep track of your blood pressure. I'm sure you all do. Handling stress, we did a meditation study showing the gene expression changes that were beneficial for Alzheimer's disease. And we published that already. And there are many ways to reduce stress. Basically, take a break, leave work. This is especially folks who are way too hard every day. But basically, take time to be mindful. Take time to be in the moment. Avoid those senior moments by paying attention to what's around you. Task-driven activities, gardening, hobbies. Don't let your mind idle. Idle mind is the devil's workshop, and the devil's Alzheimer's. Stay busy. I like to say, replace any fears you have, ruminations, with concerns. Don't say, I'm afraid. It's an ongoing concern. Replace anxiety with making plans. Replace obsessing about the past or remorse with recapitulation and how to learn from it for the future. These are all positive mindfulness that reduce stress. Interaction with others. Loneliness increases risk for Alzheimer's twofold. Not being alone. Being alone, if you like it, fine. But if you're alone and stressed, it increases risk. Exercise. Amazing effects of exercise. Cure Alzheimer's Fund funded this project we published in Science a couple of years ago, where giving a running wheel to Alzheimer's mice, a running wheel, was as good as any drug we ever tried. What happened was the running wheel with them exercising induced the birth of new nerve cells in the hippocampus, which increased hippocampal function and reduced cognitive decline in the mice. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain. It brings in nutrients from organs outside the brain that can induce the birth of new nerve cells and also growth to keep those new nerve cells alive, all improving cognition. So for exercise, I want to aim basically at, if you have a Fitbit or Apple Watch, 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day. Just get that blood flow going at least 10 to 20 minutes per day. 10 will be 20 minutes. You can also just deliberately park your car away from where you're going. Take this on the elevator within reason. If you're watching TV, on sport on TV, spend exercising. I have in back of me, I have my recumbent bike, in front of the TV, and so I can exercise while I watch a game. And set aside also 10 to 20 minutes a day just to stretch. You don't have to do yoga, basic stretching. L is learn new things. Okay, the more synapses you make every day by learning new things, you also build up your synaptic reserve. So I tell folks, no matter how old you are, build up your synaptic reserve every day. Because the more synapses you have, the more you can lose before you lose it. All this devastation of Alzheimer's disease leads to because you lose synapse connections between nerves when you learn things. A new hobby, a documentary, reading or listening to a book about history, and you're making new synapses, it's building up your synaptic reserve. Because it says my internet connection is unstable, but I'll keep. Finally, D is diet. The Mediterranean diet, less meat, more plant-based diet, particularly helps your gut microbiome, the bacteria live in your gut, keep your brain healthy. I actually started a company around this to identify bacteria in the gut and drugs, bugs as drugs. And so the Mediterranean diet feed your gut microbiome. If it's happy, keep your brain happy. In our Alzheimer's mice, fixing their gut microbiome, we were able to reduce pathology in the brain, gut-brain axis. For D in diet, I also include dental hygiene. After you eat, floss, because the bacteria in your mouth, in your gums, can get into your brain. I don't have time to get into this, but they can also trigger Alzheimer's pathology. So flossing, periodontal disease has a stronger and stronger link every day with Alzheimer's disease. Healthy diet, Mediterranean diet, mentioned fiber, fruits, veggies, seeds, nuts, leafy greens, cut down on the fat and sugar. For breakfast, yogurt with whole grains is a combination of a probiotic and a prebiotic that helps your gut. A salad at least once a day with lunch or dinner. Antioxidants, blueberries, green tea, dark chocolate, red wine. Dark chocolate and red wine, my favorite. Omega-3s. If it's fish oil, make sure you allot for it. It's cheap fish oil is heavy metals, or you can do what I do, is vegan sourced omega-3s that are made algae, but they're also very good. So I'll end by saying this, that mind and body today are only the results of your choices and habits made yesterday. Your mind and body tomorrow are the results of your choices and habits today. So at age, you can choose to change these habits, rewire your brain, reprogram your gene expression, your lifestyle and habits to make yourself healthier. Start anytime you want. We use SHIELD for that person. An easy way to remember, my last slide, sleep more, meditate more, be in the moment more, pay attention, less, see family and friends more, move more, learn more, eat better and less. And because I'm a geneticist, I have to say your ancestors wisely, because genes also matter. So I'm going to end there. I'm going to thank these people who do all the work I told you about from our unit, 70 strong. Alzheimer's Funds, our main source of funding with the NIH and these other foundations. If we have time to take any questions you might have. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Rudy. Your internet was a little weak, but I think we got 99% of it, and that was a great presentation, I thought, and I got a lot of comments on chat. So I think you inspired a lot of people with some good questions, many of which you covered in your talk after the question was asked. But I'll start with one that came in at the end, which is, how can I get a copy of these great slides? And as Jennifer, our HBS interface, has said, a recording of this session will be shared in the coming weeks. So you will be able to listen to that whole talk again if you didn't get it the first time. Rudy, there was a question which I thought is a good one, which is, in your work or in the work of your fellow researchers, what is the role of big data and AI, artificial intelligence, in moving the ball forward?
I think we might have lost Rudy.
We lost Rudy. Well, I can't answer that question, so we're in trouble. Huh.
Let's try to get him back on. I don't know if there's any questions. Oh, here he is. Let's see.
Can you let him in the room?
He's here. It's just his microphone isn't working.
Rudy, can you hear us? Are you on mute, Rudy?
I don't see a microphone icon for him. So let me try to troubleshoot him to get him back on. And I don't know if there's any questions that the audience may have for you.
Most of the questions were on Rudy. I'll do my best. One question was,
So sorry.
oh, Rudy, you're back.
Yeah, I just got a bad connection. You were able to hear.
No, you're still breaking up. My God, you do these Zoom calls 24 hours a day. How can you live with a bad connection?
I usually tap on.
Rudy, would you be able to send me a phone number in the private chat and I can give you a call and connect audio that way?
Am I still on? Is it still?
You know, you're better.
Send it.
All right. Let me try quickly, and I apologize for this internet difficulty. One question that was asked was, do traumatic life events increase brain inflammation? And I think Rudy, when he talked about SHIELD and started with stress, at least indicates that yes, traumatic life events can increase brain. Are we right about that, Rudy, or not?
Yes, you get a burst of cortisol.
Okay, it's still a poor connection.
Why don't you call my phone and I'll do it that way? We're in chat.
Great, I am sending you.
I'm so sorry. It doesn't normally happen with something's going on.
You should be hearing ring. And then if you press *6, it should unmute.
I don't think this is going to work.
Unmute me.
Okay, can you unmute him, Jennifer?
Yes, I am. You should be unmuted.
Rudy,
Okay, it sounds like you can. Let me just turn off the volume here. It sounds like you can hear me now, right?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So,
Great.
Rudy,
Yeah. So about traumatic life
big
events,
data,
you can get.
Go ahead.
You can get a big burst of cortisol, which is basically a stress hormone, and by killing a large number of neurons, that would trigger cytokine storm neuroinflammation. So it's kind of a direct route to neuroinflammation that may not require the initial tangles and amyloid that one gets with advanced stage. So that will basically make things worse by increasing neuroinflammation.
Rudy, there was another question about the role of big data and artificial intelligence in the work of you and your fellow researchers. Can you chat about that?
Yeah, we couldn't do what we do without it. Whether it's developing a polygenic risk score for your overall genetic risk using whole genome sequencing data, or drug discovery. You know, a lot of times when we do these drug screens in the dish, we can then take those drugs that worked and then go by AI and find other drugs that would be predicted to work because those drugs worked. And then we can take those drugs and test them in the dish and come up with additional drugs. In fact, I would say 30% of the drugs and natural products we've identified came from AI analysis of the original drugs and natural products that came out of the physical screening of the dish. So AI is also important for assessing diagnosis. It's everywhere. We couldn't do without it.
Rudy, somebody asked, does baby gene sequencing assist identifying those with a polygenic risk or with mutated variants?
Well, you know, eventually with whole genome sequencing, we'll get polygenic risk scores for everything as early as we want. But I have to make the point that across diseases where there's a genetic basis, less than 5% of gene variants or gene mutations guarantee the disease. whether it's heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the genes involved with familial early onset disease are usually the ones that guarantee, and that's usually only maybe 2 to 5% of all disease. And 95% or more of cases of age-related disease, the genetics may predispose you, but it does not guarantee you get the disease, which means lifestyle and things like SHIELD do matter and do make a difference, and folks need to know that.
Rudy, there's a question about whether there is a connection between uncorrected hearing loss and the development of dementia.
Great question. So it was a chicken and egg question for matter for a while. It doesn't look like Alzheimer's leads to hearing loss, but if you have hearing loss, it's more likely that your quality and quantity of social interaction will go down. Your quantity and quality of learning new things and inducing new synapses to form, your cognitive reserve goes down because you may be not hearing what's going on. Now, if you're in a discussion around the kitchen table or at a meeting and you can't hear well, you kind of drop out. You kind of phase out of the discussion. You're getting less stimulation, whether it's from people or just from learning new things. So hearing loss can basically remove you from interaction with the world, which will have that same effect as not being stimulated by others or stimulated by learning new things, and will have a negative effect. So yes, hearing is very important for purposes of cognitive stimulation.
Rudy, I know you're very wary of saying anything negative about anybody else, and you're not an MD, you're a Ph.D. But I have a question about whether the advertising for Prevagen or other supplements, do they work?
Yeah. So I guess the nicest thing
let me ask it another way. Do you take Prevagen?
No. No.
Okay.
I think the nicest thing to say is we don't know if any of them work. And I would say for many of the ones you see on TV, it's not a coincidence that there are many ongoing lawsuits for false claims. And some of these folks pay just as much money for their lawyers as they do for their advertising on TV. So you can read between the lines there. But most brain supplements out there suffer from the problem that there's no scientific backup for what they do. And I would say that I know of no scientific data to support a jellyfish protein helping my brain. I'll just say that. Other ones, they mean well. They'll add 15 different ingredients for brain health into one capsule this size. And they say, and if you look at the individual ingredients, they're good. The problem is in these capsules that brag about 10, 15 ingredients, there's not enough of any single ingredient to help you. Because for each of these supplements, you have to have a certain dose for it to work. So if you have 15 different ingredients in one little capsule and not enough of any, you're taking nothing. So a lot of the brain supplements suffer for that, the right ingredients, but not enough of any one of them. That's why when I take supplements in the morning for my own brain, I got a handful of capsules because I know how much I need of each, and it's not going to fit in one. So those are the two issues with brain supplements.
Rudy, I think you talked about it a little bit when you talked about some of the potential drugs that are in the pipeline, but there's a question about, can anything be done for someone whose Alzheimer's is quite far along? So not early detection, early prevention, but can anything be done? I think the answer today is love them and care for them, but not too much right now, but in the future, fairly soon.
Well, that's why I think if you really want to help someone who's in the middle stages or late stages of Alzheimer's disease, pharmacologically, yes, you can try doing the things in SHIELD or try supplements. But I had this discussion with Howard Phillip yesterday in a panel that we did. Howard's the head of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Fund, and he said, it's great to tell folks to get enough sleep and exercise, et cetera, but we don't know if it's going to necessarily help somebody who already has Alzheimer's disease. There's no harm in doing it. Same thing with many of the supplements. But when it comes to drugs, I think the best hope for helping a patient who's suffering right now is to stop the cell death, stop the neurons from dying, protect them. And that's why I think the approach with Amylyx, using drugs that provide neuroprotection, is the best bet. And it worked in ALS. And we're waiting anxiously for the Alzheimer's results to see if it works in Alzheimer's. If we can develop more drugs and supplements that protect neurons from dying, those will have the best bet of helping ongoing patients. But we're going to have to do the trials and see.
So Rudy, one last question that I'm going to ask, and it's amazing we're keeping this reunion session on time. So thank you for a very interesting and timely presentation.
You're welcome.
I'd like to end with your prediction or your assessment as to, given the pace of improvement and discovery, is it fair to hope that my children, who are 42 and 50, when they get to 65, so give you 15 to 20 years from now, will be able to look forward to a life without the ravages of this disease?
I strongly believe that. I believe that between blood tests, brain imaging, digital technologies, all of the indicators of brain health, the indicators of pre-symptomatic disease that we can already achieve and growing every day, that early detection will be possible. And with genetics, knowing when to go for early detection based on early prediction will be possible. Of course, the biggest challenge is early intervention. What do you do? I mean, it's right now we're way ahead in terms of knowing if someone's in trouble than helping them. But it's all about the right drug at the right time. You know, let's say next Monday, aducanumab is not approved. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. What you think about is aducanumab as something you might use in someone who has amyloid in their brain 20 years before symptoms, and use that treatment to get that amyloid out. And then maybe use the drug that we're developing with Cure Alzheimer's Fund, I talked about, the gamma secretase modulator, to maintain that amyloid down, the way you take a cholesterol drug for heart disease. The drugs that stop the early pathology are here. They're already here. But the only reason they won't get approved is because we're using them too late.
Well,
and that doesn't mean you throw them away. You go back and you talk to the FDA about how to get these drugs used for prevention with early detection. And that will, within 15 to 20 years, that will happen. I have no doubt. My daughter's 13. I'm a late life dad who's 13. We'll get her a test someday to say, how you doing? And she'll never get to the point of the brain degenerating. We'll take care of that before that happens, just like we do with heart disease and diabetes.
Well, Rudy, thank you for your tremendous insights, for your tremendous work, and for sharing your talk with the class of 66. And Bruce, I'll turn it over to you or to Jennifer. Thanks so much, Rudy.
You're very welcome, and thank you all for listening. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We're just going to take a short break.
Yeah, let me just make a quick comment. Jennifer and Rudy and Henry, that was phenomenal. We have a very good session coming up on climate change. So in about between 5 and 10 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes, I will be introducing Pat Cody, who will introduce the next panel. Is that okay with everybody? All right, Jennifer, do you think everybody heard me?
I do.
I hope so. All right, see you all shortly.
Ray? Can you hear me, Ray?
I can.
I've noticed a lot of people, including Bruce, have very bright lights behind them, and that really reduces the visibility of their face. People like you, which have something dark behind you, you can see you much better. And I thought if you could pass it on.
Okay. Now, for the moment, I'm on an iPad and my computer, and I can't figure out how to turn off my iPad.
There's a button on the side, up the side, press it and hold it usually. And then it'll say slide to shut off.
Hey, Rich, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I've put a light on right in front of me, which might have helped a little. And
It helps a lot.
The light's in good. Well, as long as it helps, that's.
You can't do anything about the blinds?
You look fine, Bruce. I mean,
I was gonna. Yeah,
Bruce, you look fine. You look fine.
The light's a lot better.
Thank you, Wade.
Yeah, Hollywood,
Rick.
fine. I mean, Richard, you have a better makeup artist than I do. But oh shit! There goes my picture. What happened?
Well, make sure you go back to show your video.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Yeah, there I go. Okay.
Oh,
hey.
you look great, Wade.
Thanks.
So,
Rich, good to see you. Bruce, this is a great program.
Well, thank you, Wade. And you were part of the origins of this, so thank you very much as well. So
this was you really got a top guy. I want to send this to my doctor and get him involved with me. I want some supplements quickly.
Yeah. By the way, he does take a lot of supplements. In some respects, if Henry is on right now, it would be helpful, Henry, if maybe Rudy might share with us.
Yes.
Maybe,
he's reluctant to do it in a recorded session like that, but I will. I believe he shared them with you, Bruce, by email, and I will encourage him to do it by email too. I'll get Jennifer to give his email to the class, and
fantastic.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, look, supplements are just supplements. We take a lot of them, chondroitin and this and that.
Right.
Hey, Henry, it's Judd Reese. Do you take supplements?
Yes, I take some of the ones that I take some of that Shield advice. I get good sleep every night. I do take supplements that Rudy takes, not all of them. He has a huge number that I don't think will take, but I do take 3 or 4. What I refuse to do is do the Mediterranean diet. At age 78, I eat a hell of a lot of red meat, and I enjoy it very much.
I'm in your camp.
Henry, I think you're making a fantastic contribution.
Well, thank you, Rich. It's good to see you.
And I think the way you've structured it is brilliant. I just can't believe the overhead and people getting a grant for a year and a half, and the second half of the year, the last half of the year, they're preparing for the next grant, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, you're right.
I co-founded a cancer drug discovery company 10 years ago, and the thing I was most shocked about is most leading researchers don't have the time to read what most leading researchers are writing. And we had numerous articles in leading journals like Johns Hopkins and what have you. And We don't even get any letters saying you're crazy or it's a tree falling in the forest. Do you think that's a problem in Alzheimer's?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat of a problem, but one of the many, I don't know, my experience is that several medical and disease-specific nonprofits hire a staff member to decide what grants to fund and what not to. And that staff member, certainly, to your point, that staff member cannot keep current with the latest information that is cutting edge. And so we don't do that. We let Rudy and a group of maybe 3 of our researchers, they set the agenda as to what the group is going to study, because they do read all the journals and they know the cutting edge of everything.
I mean, I just rebooted my modem and I think I'm okay now. If there's any other things you want me to clarify, I'm back on it.
Henry,
Well,
can I ask a question? How do we get our brain, can we get into your clinic to see how each one of us are doing? Get an audit, a brain audit?
This is better.
Rudy, that was to you.
Yeah, sure. We're happy to take in new folks and give our assessment and our recommendations for brain health. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you'd have to register with Mass General Hospital in the McCance Center for Brain Health, and I don't know if we take everybody, do we, Rudy, for a clinical assessment or not?
Yeah, anybody who wants to come can certainly make an appointment. Yes.
Okay.
Thank
How
you.
long does it take? How long is the appointment?
I think because of COVID, we're not overly booked. So let me.
How long does it take to get the assessments? How long do you have?
Or the actual. You would come in for a few hours. Actually,
That's all.
Now, what about other cities? Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, I mean, in different cities, like in New York, the counterpart to us in New York is at Cornell Weill. Richard Isaacson has a program similar to what we're doing.
And Richard Isaacson is first rate.
Yeah, and not every city has something equivalent to what we're doing and what Isaacson is doing in New York.
And Chicago?
I would have to look into whether there's a program there. I don't know one offhand that's doing brain health the way we're doing it. There's lots of good Alzheimer's research at the University of Chicago and the Mesalem Center, but I don't know if they have a brain health clinic.